Want to better understand yourself, others, and the best path for your life? Welcome to Authentic Living, podcast for a better life. The podcast where we delve into life themes and how learning who you authentically are can change your entire life. Here are your hosts, John Voris and Kim Eley.
All right, John, welcome. Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Glad to be here.
Me too. So for today's topic, we want to talk about John's origin story. So you guys know every superhero has an origin story to share. And John, you have a great story. So would you please tell our listeners about the time when you were a door-to-door salesman? So first, just to give the full background, describe for our listeners what door-to-door sales are.
Well, in my day, that was when you drove around industrial areas or downtown city areas and you knocked on businesses, not homes, but businesses. And so it was door to door. So I might take a street in a downtown area and I might see a beautician. I might see insurance sales rep. I might see a doctor. I might see an accountant. I might see an attorney. I might see somebody running a general store. And so these are the people I called on. And what I did is I sold them food. Sounds very bizarre. So I was Swan, but with no truck. So what I did is I had a brochure, a stack of brochures, and an invoice book. And I would go door to door, and I would be selling ham, roast beef, pastrami, turkey, all kinds of things. And then after I sold it to them, I didn't take any money. What I did is place an order with the company, and then they delivered the following week.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
So when you got into door-to-door sales, is this a career that you thought you'd be doing in college?
Oh, not at all. In fact, when I went to college, at first I wanted to get into law, and I did later, but I didn't care for it. But while I was in college, I did door-to-door sales jobs. And that would be companies like Cutco Cutlery, Encyclopedia Britannica, believe it or not.
Gotcha.
And all these things where you go door to door. Now you're in homes, residential area. And I was terrible at it. I got fired 4 times in a row. And then I quit 3 times. And I just gave up. And what it was rejection, just over and over and over again. So I gave it up and didn't go to law school. I didn't care for it. And then I bought a delicatessen because my end goal was to buy a business anyway. So
yeah,
I bought a delicatessen. I kept it for a few years and then sold it. And one of my vendors said, why don't you work for us and sell our products, but we're going to do wholesale. We're going to go to grocery stores, delicatessens, restaurants, things like that. I thought that'd be a great idea.
Right.
So I sold the deli, but about in the same month, he called up and he said, well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to file bankruptcy.
Oh, no.
But John, don't worry, because we're going to go back to how the business started, which is door-to-door sales.
No. Oh, crud.
So now I'm facing 7 failures, and I was married, and my wife stayed home, which is fine. She didn't work, and we had one child, one daughter. So now, and that was really, can you imagine how terrifying that had to be? I think about it, then it was just mind-boggling. Yeah. Looking at total failure, and now we have total responsibility. So what I had to do was research why there was so much failure in sales training.
Well, I can imagine it was probably really hard to get rejected over and over again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So what changed?
Well, so what I did is when I graduated from Berkeley, I graduated in philosophy and I focused on language. What I learned was in sales training, they really don't get into language, how it works, how it functions, how it influences people. And so there was a great deal of information that was missing. And so I realized that in this country, it's called Western psychology. It has a label. And then there's continental psychology. And in the philosophy readings, I had sources of continental or European psychology as a source. And they were very different. It come from the approach of what it means to be human
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Western psychology is analytic. It's just full of definitions. And for example, there's a book on psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's all definitions and categories. And the problem is people can't always be put in these categories. So what the European psychologist does is it starts from the perspective of what it means to be human. And that gave all the answers that I was looking for. In fact, I eliminated or got rid of everything I ever learned in sales.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
took this on.
You just threw it all out
Yeah.
and started over. So based on the psychology, I'm curious to know about that. How did that influence how you started over? Like what did you start over with?
Oh, good. So everything was an experiment. And so it took me about 3 months of trial error, 3 months of I'll use this approach and see if it works. I'll use another approach and see if it works. And then finally, I found something that was working. It took about 5 months and it created a model for me to follow. And that model was very successful. And I ended up door-to-door sales for 20 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So I went from 7 failures to 20 years. And the only reason why that happened is because I completely eliminated everything I learned in this country from sales. And I focused totally on European psychology.
Oh my gosh. So one thing I want to know is, you had sales training before, correct? Before you went out. Were you able to use that sales training, or what would happen if you went out and tried to use the sales training that the companies would provide for you?
What they would do is first of all, they'd script you. And so that's the first problem is that it works if you have the personality to match it. You can imagine if John Wayne took on the roles of Joe Pesci, how would that look, right? So, and that's very, very important. So what you're saying has to resonate with who you are, and it has to resonate with how you're being perceived by your prospects.
So when you're talking about scripting, I'm envisioning, and I think we're all familiar with telemarketers. Right. So somebody calls up and they're like, "Hello, Mr. Voris. I'd like to talk to you about blah, blah, blah." That's what you're talking about with the scripted sales.
Right, exactly. So what I had to do was eliminate that. And so I did. And so I would walk up, if you were my prospect, I would say, "Hello, how are you doing this afternoon? Have you ever seen our line?" You'd say, "Line of what?" Very good. I'm sorry. Here's my brochure. Listen, I'll tell you what, have you ever seen one of our hams? And you'd say no. And I would go out in the car and bring one in. In the meantime, you're looking at the list. That's all I did. I didn't say what company I was from. I never said my name. I didn't say anything. But I usually started it off with, "That's a very interesting backdrop. Do you have? Where are you?" And you say, "Well, I'm in a studio." "Oh, really? And I see a glass window over there. Is there anything you can see? Anything interesting over there?" So suddenly I'm getting into your world in the moment.
Gotcha. And I take it the scripts that you were normally given wouldn't go there.
I wouldn't do that at all. No. Gotcha. And then I would say, oh, by the way, incidentally, have you ever seen one of our hams? And you'd say, "No, here's our brochure."
So what was the difference between the scripted approach and then this new approach that you took?
So what I learned from symbolism taught in Europe, heavily in Europe, is that everything is a symbol. But all that means is every object has a name. So if I were to ask you, can you list some symbols to me? What would you come up with?
My thought is like traffic signs, like octagonal red is stop and yellow triangle is yield.
Very good. Okay. That's exactly what people do. And they might say, well, letters are symbols and logos are symbols. And so what they're doing is they're reciting created symbols. Now, what if I said that backdrop is a symbol? What if I said the floor is a symbol? The windows are symbols. Then all of a sudden your world opens up to, wait a minute, what does that mean? And what that means is you're sitting in a place that is resonating certain symbolic meaning that you in this moment are attaching yourself. And
Gotcha.
maybe it's a soundproof booth is what you're after.
But help me out here. So with symbols, how would that relate to sales? You would walk in and pick up on symbols in.
Okay, yes, I would do that. But you can start off with, what does it mean? Let's say, what would it mean to be a master carpenter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you need to be a master carpenter? So I'll just start off and just say, you need to be patient, don't you?
Definitely. Detail oriented.
Detail, right? A good sense of space.
Mm-hmm.
I would see this, and this has symbolic meaning already.
Okay.
Okay, so this person is doing this, which means that what they're doing is expressing who they are,
Okay.
and it's out in the open. Anybody could read this.
Gotcha. So you would use the symbols around people to read them. Is that correct?
No, exactly.
Oh,
So
okay.
you've got a carpenter. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I would say, okay, what does it need to be? And then as I approach the business, then
Mhm.
I'm saying objects that conform to my initial assumption, but now it's getting it very accurate and specific.
Gotcha.
So let's say I saw this individual did the finishing work on boats,
Mhm.
and everything is so smooth and cut perfectly. And so I would look at those and say that is amazing. And how do you do that? And so what I would do is learn who he is by knowing who I'm not. Because I'm not a master carpenter, and I do not work on boats. Why? Because I don't have these characteristics. Okay. So by knowing that, I start asking him about things I'm observing, and he doesn't know what I'm doing at all. And so he's validating, yeah, oh, that took for hours to cut out that one part, or yeah, I have to glue that, and just whatever he has to do. And so then when he's talking about it,
Uh-huh.
he gets very excited.
Gotcha.
And by getting excited, I'm really seeing the pleasure and satisfaction he is deriving from his career, which tells me he's expressing his authentic identity.
I think I've got it. So instead of walking in scripted to someone and, laying on the script that may or may not resonate with them, you would go in, observe the situation, identify symbols, and then start asking questions based on what you've observed. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Ah, gotcha.
So every assumption I make, I have to have validated.
How would a validation occur? By that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So excellent. All right. We're going to take a short break, but John, this is fantastic. So I want to ask you more about this and your origin story when we come back.
After a quick break, John and Kim will be back with more of Authentic Living, podcast for a better life.
Hi, I'm Kim Eley, and with my company, Kiwi Publishing, KWE Publishing, I help take people from idea to published book. But you know about me, I want to share with you today is about an amazing nonprofit called Podium RVA. It's fantastic. They work with public schools, youth development networks, and community centers across the greater Richmond area to bring writing, communication, and leadership workshops to RVA youth. Podium mentors meet weekly all year long with youth in workshops, preparing them for participation in Podium publications, such as their annual literary journal and quarterly zines, and showcases to share their creative voices with the larger communities. It's a super fun, amazing group, and I love what they're doing. So check out podiumrva.org and support them today. They're amazing.
Welcome back to Authentic Living, podcast for a better life. Here's John Voris and Kim Eley.
Okay, we're back now, John. So before we left, you were describing how you changed your approach to sales. How did it work as far as success-wise? I mean, did it change how you?
Oh, absolutely. When I was door-to-door selling, I sold 12 to 14 out of 20. 20 people that I've never seen before.
Oh my gosh.
That's about 70% was my average.
That's not normal.
No, it isn't. 5% is normal.
gosh.
5%. What I would do is I'd actually start off with, we know when let's say we're traveling across the country and we go into a town, we know if it's a prosperous town, if people are, looks like there's someone down and out, maybe it's a dangerous town. I mean, everybody feel it, right?
Right.
Feel it. This is exactly what I would do is feel the surroundings and change my perspective in the moment as I'm doing it. So the beginning would be walking down the street and looking at buildings. Buildings have an expression, a symbolic expression everyone does. Mm-hmm. And so what is that? Mm-hmm. So I remember one was a huge rock building. And that tells me this individual, someone inside this is stretching it, may be someone of power. Really like this building, the owner. Mm-hmm. And so I just put in the back of my head. I don't make anything of it. But then what I do is as if I approach and I open up the door and I'm looking around, I'm still reading symbols. If I don't like what I see, I close the door.
Gotcha.
Or just walk out. Or just give them a brochure and walk out. I don't say anything. That's important. Because if I don't say anything, I don't count it.
Gotcha.
Then I go to the next building. Oh, this looks like a good prospect. And I say hello and I start, I have to count it. I might walk past 5 businesses and walk in the 6th. And so I'm not going to count those 5. So that means that when I say I sell 12 and 14 out of 20, I might pass 30 businesses.
Gotcha.
Now, if you use the American paradigm of one business after another, this is impossible. These statistics cannot happen.
Gotcha.
But I don't do that. I read the buildings, I read the people, and then I came in, and it was very consistent. The reason why is because I clung to one sentence that I made up is the human mind has only one need. That is the perpetual need to express their authentic identity through objects, people, and events.
Amazing.
So I hold that as an absolute truth.
I imagine by doing that, you probably saved yourself not only a lot of rejection, but also saved time as well. Seems like it was very effective.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, rejection was the first aspect I had to eliminate. And I did that. I didn't play with it. Many methods play with it. And they'll say, well, the more you see, the more you sell. It's just part of the game. And that's how they approach it. No, you have the ability to change your feeling of rejection. You have the tools inside yourself. And that's what I used.
Yeah.
And so one was, believe it or not, this is counterintuitive, but I was in the car and I would say to myself, I can't sell. I don't want to sell. I'm terrible at selling. People don't like me at all. And in fact, if someone wants to buy something, I wonder if I'm going to even sell it to them.
Oh my gosh.
You should. I don't know. All I'm doing is taking that sales facade away and destroying it.
Right.
So what I end up with is all I want to do is make a friend.
I love that. I imagine you have a different energy when you come into meeting someone saying, I'd like to make a friend versus I'd like to make a sale.
Yeah. And especially if your language changes, your attitude changes, and they pick up on that. People will feel that the walls go up.
Oh, so true. I think that's why sometimes like car salesmen give people the heebie-jeebies because they're all like, hey, how are you today?
Yeah,
It feels very disingenuous.
You and I both have clothes. Hey, we got something in common.
Right. I want to know, how did you take what you learned and then go on to expand it to what you use now, authentic systems?
Okay. If it's true that we use objects, people, and events to express who we are, and you could read those objects, people, and events to discover who they are, then the question is, how do you want to apply it? So we can apply it with relationships. You can apply it with sales, marketing, anything in business. It doesn't matter what it is.
That's so cool.
Because what I really liked about it is it takes the guessing out. I don't have to guess anything. I'm actually seeing immediately who this person is by looking at the surrounding.
That's so awesome. You know what, John? It's making me think of, have you ever heard the saying, read the room? Meaning somebody will come in and they'll tell an off-color joke or do something inappropriate. It's like, didn't you read the room?
Exactly. That's one aspect. But now, for example, we know what we want.
Mm-hmm.
But my question was, why do we want to want what we want?
Oh, ooh, I like that. Okay.
So that's going to be the answer if you're in relationships, if you're selling, whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
And even you can turn it on yourself.
Oh, I love that. And that's so true because like the very first relationship we have is with ourselves, right?
Exactly.
We have to get to know ourselves.
Well, that's what brings me up your book, Tickers.
Oh,
That's what I liked about it is an example of discovering what makes people tick. And what I'm doing is the same thing in a different way. I'm finding their authentic identity. You found it too, but the difference is you offer an example, a concrete example of what it is like for someone to actually access their own authentic identity.
Oh, well, thank you. And yes, that resonated with me so much when you and I first met and we talked about my book because I interviewed people who love what they do. I've met tons of people who hate what they do. I was like, what do people do who love what they do?
Right.
And so that was the commonality was I guess their lives were unscripted in a sense. They were just following what resonated with them, what they wanted to do. So yeah, it was exciting to have those concrete examples, but you through Authentic Systems were able to help me understand why the people acted the way they did and why the paths that they chose really, really resonated with them.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm up to. And 55% of the people are not happy with their jobs. There's a high percentage that don't feel secure in their jobs.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because they don't separate out what you can do, what you could do, what you should do, and what you must do. They don't separate that out. Everything's what I can do.
Right.
I can be a mortician. Well, sure. But you're talking about the ability.
Yeah.
But that's not going to make me happy.
Right.
That's what's missed. That's why many people go into sales because no experience is required, no degree is required, and you really can make as much money as you want, but it has to do with you as a human being and what you're all about.
Absolutely. That's why I'm so excited about this podcast because we titled it Authentic Relationships because like we touched on, your very first relationship is with yourself. But once we all evolve past ourselves and talk to other people as well, we have to figure out how to get along with one another. We have to learn how to read the room in all our relationships, right? So you used Authentic Systems, in marriages, careers. Can you share with us some of the other ways that people you've used with Authentic Systems?
There was a couple that was really having a problem. And one of my discoveries in the research, European research, is the difference between people wanting a physical and abstract result. So, for example, myself, I'm after an abstract result. My wife is after a physical result. So my wife would call up and say, by the way, I picked up your laundry at the laundromat. That's a physical action she did for me to show affection. I call up and say, how'd you like to go to dinner tonight? And I'm creating an abstract atmosphere.
Gotcha.
But she could say, you never do enough around the house. And I could say, you never invite me out to dinner. So this is what happened with the couple that I had is they were really communicating the same affection, but the other person wasn't picking up on it. Once they did, their arguments disappeared. Most of them that were related to that disappeared.
That's fantastic.
They stayed together.
That's so cool.
And now this happens with, an architect. An architect understands the concept of what he's trying to do, or he or she.
Mhm.
And then you have the carpenter, and they have to understand the physical side of what this mental image is. And quite often, the carpenter's after physical result, and the architect is after abstract result, and they argue constantly.
Oh my gosh.
And I saw that one.
The family disputes,
Oh,
friends not seeing eye to eye,
right.
people having misunderstandings. If I'm going to say when they learn about authentic systems, they can then understand other people better. First, they understand themselves and then other people to be able to maybe get rid of some of these petty fights or jumping to conclusions.
Yes. Now you had an example of someone who was power. Can you tell us that?
Oh, absolutely. Glad to. I worked with an awesome client, and when she and I first got on the phone together, so full disclosure, I've had my assessment done. So I know that my life theme is very different from a power life theme. And as we go into further podcasts, we're going to talk about the life themes. But this person, I realized she responded well to power, meaning she frequently would name drop people. Oh, I took studies with so and was very much about prestige. And so I was able to figure out, based on how she was talking, kind of, and you taught me this, that her language was really a symbol. The things that she was saying
Right.
symbolized and showed what she cared about. I was able to modify how I spoke and be able to speak to her in her language.
Mhm.
And it worked really well, because normally I think the way she spoke candidly kind of grated on my nerves, because I was like, who does she think she is?
I got it. Mhm.
But once I understood her, we had a great conversation. We worked together, and we actually published her book together. And it was a fantastic experience because I understood where she was coming from.
Right. Interoffice conflict is another area that I use authentic systems. And it's, for example, there was one woman was responsible for logistics. What she did is social events. She generated the social events in the town. And then you had salespeople outside and trying to fill in the venue. And they always fought. The two people who were in sales were after abstract results. And she was after physical result because she actually had to get it done.
Gotcha.
So it was always back and forth, and they weren't communicating. I assessed all three.
Mm-hmm.
And then one called me up and said, oh, I had so much fun. I was so angry at whoever it was. And then I realized in the moment that she was after the physical result and I'm abstract. And she said, she laughed at herself. And then went in her office and explained what just happened. They all laughed because they really get it now.
Right. So as we wrap up, I want to just say this is a foreshadowing of future episodes that we're going to have. What we'll do is we'll explore authentic relationships. We'll learn more about authentic systems that you're going to share with us. Mm-hmm. We'll also talk about tickers and some of the people I've met along the way and give some real life examples. I'm excited too, because we're going to sometimes have some speakers who are featured, and we'll talk about various topics, but there's so much to explore. This is really exciting.
Oh, yes. Well, in fact, I did this for 20 years and then retired in about 2004, and I spent the rest of the time researching. And as I research, I'm getting into so many other aspects where this works.
Oh,
it is, but it's all archetypal. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm not interested in people's problems. Mm-hmm. What I'm doing is trying to help guide and assist their life. I work very well with a woman who is a career counselor.
Awesome.
The last 20 clients she had were attorneys.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so it was very common for the attorney to be a justice-themed person looking for fairness. And if they're in a firm that in their mind seems to be corrupt mm-hmm. or not exactly transparent, they have problems. They get anxious. They don't want to associate with them any longer. And so what do? Well, once they see it, then mm-hmm. they know exactly what to do. They quit, they go to another department, they have another level of career, whatever it might be, and they don't give up law. But they understand what really did happen. A lot of times they'll go to a nonprofit because they're not as pushy.
Gotcha. So these are the types of episodes we're going to have coming up. So thank you, John. You guys, if you like what you hear, please share with your friends and subscribe.
Very good.
Fantastic. See you next time.
All right. Thank you.
This concludes Authentic Living, podcast for a better life. Thanks for spending time with us. Hope you join us again soon.